And welcome to this tutorial on urban heat island remote sensing. Right, so we're going to start from the beginning. Now, if you remember from the lecture, I did mention that in the context of a short course, if you want to rapidly become capable of doing these methods and monitoring urban heat islands, the best satellite data to use is actually Landsat 8. And we'll see why. Landsat 8 very much offers a complete solution in that the satellite itself was built for terminal remote sensing. NASA is providing some key data about the satellite, which has then been taken up by some users in the QGIS and GrassGIS community, and we have a nice simple workflow which is not too complicated and which is quite accessible. So I'm going to start this tutorial from the beginning, from the data download side. So here you see I am in USGS Earth Explorer. You see that I've highlighted a little box around Kanpur, and in the data I've gone in and I've selected Landsat 8 OLI TIRS. I'm just going to do a quick search if we hit results, right? So site is going to search for available tiles, and you'll see there are many. You could add conditions for cloud cover, etc., etc. Now, I've already downloaded the tile. There's just one point I wanted to make. For example, if we take, say, a cloud-free tile, let's look at this one. If it's suitable, no, it's not. So there's this little footprint tool here, which you can use to determine if your target area is really in. So this is fine. Let's get a thumbnail of the image. This should come up eventually and show us the site area. Download doesn't matter. Now, once you do this, obviously you can hit the download options here, right? So you're going to be tempted by many things here. Of course, you could think that, oh, look at this. Landsat Look thermal image. That's all I need. Unfortunately not. The Landsat Look thermal image gives you a very approximate, non-quantitative idea of which parts of the image are warmer and colder. It doesn't contain actual values of temperature. And even these images down here, Landsat Look images, plural, so it has all three above, with geographic reference, they don't have the correct temperature values. They're just quantitative tool to examine, which is why they're called Landsat Look. That allows you to examine which areas are colder and warmer. And what we're going to do today is going to be a bit more quantitative, and we're going to go the full process to do a full quantitative monitoring exercise and analysis of urban heat islands. So actually, when you download Landsat data for the purpose of temperature studies, you need to download the full level 1 GeoTIFF product. So in this case, it's 860 megabytes. I obviously don't have time to do that. It's generally just under a gigabyte of data, so it's fairly significant. I have actually already downloaded this, so I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll be back to you to show you the next step. But the key point is, do not be lured by these other quick download options. They're just for exploratory purposes. Always download the full level 1 GeoTIFF data product. Right, be right back. Okay, we're back. So I've downloaded my Landsat full product, and if I look in the folder where I have it, you need to decompress it twice. It's a zipped tar archive, so you need multiple decompression runs to actually get access to the data. And when you've done this, you've got many files. So if you look, you will have, first of all, the 11 bands. So you've got a long prefix, a long name, which has orbital information, date information, and then you will have the date, the band. So band 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is an auxiliary file, 8, 9, 10, 11. The band quality assessment and the materials. So the material files is actually really critical. This little text document of only 9 kilobytes is one of the things that really facilitates all the processes that are going to come downstream. So once you've got that stored, we're now going to go into QGIS. So if you open QGIS, now one of the things that we're going to do, show you where to get this. Close that. So we're going to install a plugin, which is a user-contributed plugin, which is really going to facilitate all the pre-processing work for ARC. And I haven't actually installed it on this computer, so I can show you exactly how it works. So we need to go into the plugins, manage and install plugins. This is one of the things that's great about QGIS is that it's got an integrated interface to add the user-contributed material. You don't have to go on the internet, download random files. It's all integrated. So if you search for semi-automated classification plugin by Luca Congedo, and you install the plugin, it's not very long. It should be reasonably quick. So this is a plugin. Actually, this is a plugin that does classification. So it's actually got some alternatives to the GraphGIS classification approaches that we've used. So you can explore this. But what's strong is that you've got a very, very powerful set of pre-processing tools to process and do atmospheric correction over satellite data. So now the process is installing. To wait a few seconds. So we're going to use a mix of QGIS and GraphGIS. So here we go. The plugin is installed. You can see that it has added tools to your QGIS layout. You can delete these tools if you're not interested in them. So and you'll see there's a key menu, SCP, right? Now we're going to go into pre-processing of Landsat data. Right, now I can enlarge this window a little bit. So, very simple actually. So we're going to convert this to top of atmospheric reflection, and actually we can even do more. So we're going to do, first of all, we're going to identify our Landsat bands. Mine are in here. And you see all the bands are there. Now in the options, select MTL file, and mine is in the Landsat directory, so I don't need to do that. We're going to convert the temperatures in Celsius. The default will be Kelvin. Celsius is a bit. We are going to apply this DOS atmospheric correction. Note that it doesn't apply to the thermal band, but it will apply to other bands that we're going to use later in the tutorial. And we are going to pan sharpen. That's it. And now we simply need to run this. We are asked to provide a directory. So I'm just going to call this SCP out. And that's our directory. Now the process has started. If you go back to the main QGIS window, you will see there's a dialog here as it processes. Now, this process can take a few minutes. If I open up the task manager, you'll see that on this machine, it is taking up at the moment approximately 20% memory. So this computer has 16 GB RAM, so it's not too bad. It's taken about 4 GB to run everything at once. So I think as long as you've got an 8 GB RAM computer, you should be absolutely fine to run this. So I'm going to stop the recording while the process works, and I will get back to you when the process has finished crunching. Okay, here we are. So that did take about 20 minutes, so that was considerable, especially because I've pan sharpened. So don't worry, if it's too slow on your computer, I will have these outputs pre-computed for you in class, so just give me a sign if you need them. Now, what we have here, if you look at your destination folder, basically is first of all, we have all the bands with radiometric correction. They have a prefix RT, and you've got bands 1 through 11s. These have been processed, so they've now got surface reflectance and top of atmospheric temperature for the thermal bands. And I've also pan sharpened, which gives us the pan sharpening of bands 2 to 7. And this is going to be useful for the calculation of vegetation indices at a slightly improved resolution. So this is in the folder. If you look into grass, you'll see that the algorithm will have actually dumped everything in QGIS, so you can see them. What we see here is very roughly the Ganga-Yamuna interfluve. Kanpur should be around here. So you can actually, if I cycle through this, you see there's Kanpur. City's right here. So that's quite interesting. So actually the city of Kanpur is here, and you see we're actually looking at all of them. If I right click on the properties of one of these images, so this is B7 of the pan sharpened. So you can see the resolution is now 15 meters by 15 meters. If you recall what pan sharpening does, it uses the 15 by 15 meter panchromatic image to improve the resolution of the multispectral images, which is normally 30 by 30 meters in Landsat. So we've got all this nice data now, and it's all been processed, it's all been written out. So now we're ready to, first of all, let's just look at temperature, and then let's look at some vegetation indices. So let's start, first of all, we can actually, there's a lot more potential, this toolbox and classification. It's a huge toolbox, and I do encourage you to explore it a bit more. There are a number of YouTube tutorials online for this. But for the moment, let's just go straight into Grass GIS. I'm actually going to close QGIS to save memory. Don't need to discard. QGIS is struggling to close because it's been processing multiple gigabytes of data. Right now, let's get Grass fired up. Okay, I'm going to create a brand new map set. So new location, let's call this Kanpur temperature. Now for the coordinate system, I could of course just select the EPSG code, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to read the projection from a georeference data file. So I'll go like this. I'm going to navigate to my outputs folder, and I'm just going to pick one of these randomly. And you see Grass, see there, UTM, zone 44. So Grass is going to pick up the projection from that image. It's going to read the metadata. Okay, do you want to add, let's say no. Do you want to do that? Let's say no for the region. New map set. Kanpur temp. Okay, so let's start Grass. Right. Grass will go through its startup routine. Okay, let me rebalance these windows. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our data. This is a slight bit tedious. So let's do something quick for now, and let's import the temperature data and have a look. So I go into the folder. Now remember in Landsat, if I play details here, remember that for Landsat, the thermal data is stored in bands 10 and 11, with 11 being a slightly longer wavelength. So just let's just look at band 11. Import that. Right. So there we have it. There is the temperature for the entire Landsat tile. Now, let's do some basic analysis here. Create a histogram of the raster map. Don't use d.histogram. That's a very old code, a bit crude. Use the histogram tool, which is the first option. Give it a second. And there is your histogram. Let's make this bigger. Right, now remember that in terms of the cell values, we had specified that we wanted temperature in Celsius. So this is the temperature distribution in that raster for the values. So we've got peak temperature at about, the dominant temperature is at about 31 degrees, with some temperatures actually quite high, getting a 40. These are probably very high, very hot spots on the landscape. So that makes sense, but of course that's just an overall picture. So now what we can do, we can locate Kanpur, which I do is over here. You can always locate the city of Kanpur because of this big abandoned meander. So here is Kanpur. Let's make this full screen actually. Right. Now what's interesting, we can pan around a bit. So if I zoom in maybe a bit further, okay, so a few things. Wow, you can notice, so here's the Ganga barrage is here, so this was obviously a high water point in time. Now we can definitely see urban areas, bare fields, water, dense vegetation. It's much cooler, and if I take a cursor here and I look for the properties, so you see this area is at 29 degrees. Makes sense. This area is nice and cool, 26. Up here, this is the IIT airstrip. This demarcation here is actually the difference between the town and the campus. So around town, we were at 29, but the minute you step on the campus, for example, you've got cool spots, 27, a good 2 degrees, and that's certainly been my experience. If we look for denser forested areas, 27, and in the peak, really warm areas, these are 34. So this already has some heat island effects, and we can certainly see that the city of Kanpur is warmer than the vegetation, but colder than bare field. Now, one effect, of course, the thermal band is not very high resolution. Right, if I zoom in even more, you can see there's really not much heat. You can just about see the airstrip here. So it's quite pale in detail, and you can actually see the IIT Kanpur land endowment, which is about here. So that's one limitation of using Landsat for temperature values, but this certainly can give us temperature, and it is something that you could repeat analyze for multiple epochs and then actually start to get at some change. Right, now, okay, I'm going to turn normal size to my map. Okay, now what I want, the next task is going to be to finish loading all the data. So again, we go back to File, Import Raster Data, Common Import Formats, right? Now the trick to multiple uploading can be a bit tedious, but the trick is to not close the import data. So for example, if I go here, right, now you don't want to import the AUX file, you just want to import the big TIFF files. You can display these by type, so you only get the TIFF files. So we've got all these files to import, but the strategy is basically you select one, you open it, then you import and reorganize your windows like so. You wait till this import sequence finishes. These are the panned images. They're going to be quite big and fairly slow to import. They're basically half a gigabyte each. Almost there. So in the meantime, you can get your own import set up. Okay, right. So we have the pan image there. Now the strategy is to not close this dialog here. Hit browse again, go to the second image, hit open, and then hit import. So import all the pan and all the unsharpened images from the QGIS SCP toolbox output. And I'll do that now, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, finally done. That did take a while. So if you look at our layers, you have all the bands from 1 to 11, both in the normal, the RT, and the pan version. I have simply unchecked these, but if we would like to, for example, look at the red band, this is the band for the red values. There we go. Of course, it's displayed in one band false color. If I want to look at the infrared, there's the infrared. If I want another look at the temperature band that we looked a minute ago, there it is. So all the bands are there. Now, let's have a bit of fun and bring up, for example, the infrared band for the pen. And zoom in on Kanpur. You can really see as a big dark spot. So there's the pan sharpened version. Let's go to IIT. Right, there's IIT. So here we can see the products of pan sharpening. There's definitely some buildings that have appeared. If I go to the same band 5 for the non-pan sharpened, which is this one here, you can see that detail has been lost, right? So this is non-pan sharpened, pan sharpened. Buildings are starting to appear. So there is an advantage in keeping a certain level of pan sharpening intact. So what we're going to do now is we are going to develop indices for the major tool that is used in managing urban heat island effect, and that is vegetation indices. It's the most well-established way to control the urban island heat effect. It's to introduce vegetation, and in order to monitor this, we are obviously going to use the NDVI index from remote sensing. So in order to do this in GRASS, we've actually got a tool which is pre-made in order to calculate vegetation indices. It works very well. So if you go imagery, we have satellite products this time and vegetation indices directly. So now we have the standard GRASS little menu box. So we need to have the input channel, red channel for surface reflectance map. Now I have taken the liberty of bringing up a little summary of the Landsat 8 bands in case you've forgotten. So red is band 4. So let's do both. So I'm going to do the ordinary one. Band 4, name of output raster map. So let's call this NDVI 30 meters. Type of vegetation index 30 meters. Optional input. Now optional input, we just need to put in the green and the NIR because of course they go into the NDVI calculation. So the NIR is going to be band 5. Remember, I'm doing the ordinary one, so band 5. And the green over here is going to be band 3. Ordinary, band 3. The rest you can leave blank because we're not going to use it for the NDVI. We're going to run. It's going to take a moment to think. These are big tiles. Landsat tiles cover a significant area, so these calculations do take time. Okay, so here we are. So I've calculated the NDVI for the pan sharpened image at 15 meters, and this is what we get. So if I query the pixel values, basically for these urban areas, what are we getting? We're getting NDVIs of about 0.2, and for the more densely vegetated areas, more something along the lines of 0.6, which is quite good. 2. Okay, so this is basically, let's have a look. Always good practice. Let's have a look at our NDVI histogram. Give it a moment. So now what we need to think is simply how to interpret, how to manage, how to monitor this vegetation index with the view that it is going to be correlated to the intensity of the urban island heat effect. So there's our histogram for our NDVIs. Let's make it a bit bigger. So we've got, actually a peak of quite low NDVIs in the image, so there's quite a vulnerability here. Remember that around 0.4, 0.5, we have moderate vegetation. Above 0.6, we have dense vegetation. So there are still parts. Now, that's kind of what I want to look at now, just as a final little calculation that we can do, and it will show you something new. If I go to the raster and we look for the map calculator. So this is just a generic calculator for rasters. So let's call this NDVI 5 because I'm going to look at the NDVI at 0.5. So the expression is simply, no, this is going to be, so we're going to look for NDVI underscore 15 meters greater or equal to 0.5. And that's going to be NDVI 5. This is basically going to give us a binary map of areas where the raster is, there we go. So let's zoom out here. So these are all areas in our map where the NDVI was actually greater than 0.5. If we go to, so 0 and 1, it's a binary map, right? So actually, so the urban areas are around here, and now what you would want to do in a management situation is you want to instill programs and methods where you could actually monitor the growth or perhaps recession of these little points which have a high NDVI and which are associated to an intensification, a compensation of urban island heat effects. And this is something you can do with the Landsat program because you would just need to reacquire imagery. And so that's all. I think this is enough for now as an evening activity. And if you're interested, what I would recommend is that you set a few bulk downloads overnight, get some Landsat data, Landsat 8 data, OLI, for different periods of the year going from hot to cold. So say if you can get a cloud-free image, and this is important, cloud-free image for say January, if you can avoid the fog, if you can find a date without the fog, and then perhaps something like August or maybe even just pre-monsoon, so late May, and you can start comparing the temperature differences with these. So that's the end of this tutorial on urban island heat effects.